Who are you?
Very good question. All depends what environment I'm in. A bit of a chameleon at times, I suppose.
Well, let's talk about early days. Tell me about growing up in Reservoir.
Yeah, northern suburbs of Melbourne, 10k from the CBD. Very much working class. Four sisters. I was the fourth youngest, a younger sister and three older sisters. And my dad was a tradesman, a printer by trade, and mum worked part-time TAB. And basically, yeah, so pretty traditional. The major breadwinner and mum, preparing us for school and driving us around to our team sports and getting there during school sports, and a really strong influence, a consistent influence. So lots of sport, state school system, Reservoir West Primary School and Lakeside High. So yeah, plenty of sport, plenty of roaming of the suburb, but with mum's friends' eyes always on you. There was nowhere to hide.
Your mum passed away in about 2004, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Tell me about motor neurone disease.
Oh, look, I didn't know much about it, and actually, fact, their catch cry is no cause, no cure, certain death. So it's an insidious, just erodes the sort of nerve endings to the muscle. So probably the one positive is that the mind stays intact. So conversations to the end are pretty special at that period when things are obviously diminishing, and it come out of the blue and. It was something I wish I hadn't experienced, but in some ways, you learn a lot about yourself and, learn a lot about my mum. Actually, had a tough time for her. She was really strong. And
how long did she live with it?
Oh, not that long. It probably, she was a fitness fanatic, morning and night, really fit, and her calf started the waist, and we thought it might have been coming from the back. And my wife's a physio, and she thought that, but my sister took her to a doctor, and they diagnosed motor neurone, and it was basically an 18-month period, really.
Wow.
Yeah, but one of the good things, my wife and myself, we had no kids. All my other sisters married with children, and we're in a position where we could shift back and, help my dad, and, so shifted in, and that was a, challenging but great period.
When did footy matter to you? When did someone say to you, you're good at this?
I started later. Not by much. I still played under 10s football, but my dad was a reasonable local footballer and played 4 games from South Melbourne, and I was always kicking the football at school, and a great family friend now, Kevin Grocock, his sons wanted me to play for Reservoir Colts, and we were sort of an older area, not the new areas. There wasn't a lot of kids, and I wanted to play, but my dad wouldn't let me. He said it's a silly game, and at that point I was playing squash with my other sisters on a Saturday morning, and my mum was in the TAB and Kevin Grocock was a punter, so he found my mum and she signed the form and let me play, and I thought it was a good excuse to get out of Sunday school because I used to go to Sunday school every week, and but I showed an aptitude, probably within the first 12 months, and a lot of junior best and fairest, and always channeled through the pathway, the under-19s and scholarship squads, and I just really wanted to play VFLA at that time. I just assumed I'd play.
Yeah. Well, history showed that you did, and you played 127 games with Fitzroy over 10 years before a knee injury ended your career. Your career actually finished at Brisbane, didn't it?
Yeah.
Can you tell me how you hurt your knee, and what is it like to be a young bloke told that's it?
It was a degenerative bone-on-bone articular surface, and that environment now compared to what the players was just push through everything. But as you're pushing through, you're doing, degenerative damage, and just the articular surface flaked off. I played 2 games for Brisbane. It had been sore for 12 months prior or longer, but you could always warm up. And so it was, the surgeon said it was like you'd flake something off. It was like a ball bearing just thrashing around your knee, so it just ripped the surfaces. And then I played 2 games for Brisbane, and it just blew up, and I had the operation. The surgeon said, don't worry. Dr. Myers in Brisbane did the surgery. He said, you're in trouble. But then I rehabbed, and then it went again, and I flew to Melbourne, and the surgeon said, I was actually his assistant. I said, how did it go? And when I woke up, and they said, you're in a bit of trouble. The surgeon wants to see you. And then he just said, don't worry about playing AFL football. You'll be lucky to walk around pain-free. So that was a bit of a shock.
How do you respond to that? How old were you at the time?
28.
Okay, so you're told it's over.
Well, I was really optimistic. Went back to the club and they said, we'll get another opinion. And I went into Dr. Bartlett in Melbourne. He said, I'll never tell anyone to retire. Let me look at your scans. And he looked at him, he started laughing. He said, well, you're gone. And it's such a shock because, you know, until you have something significant, whether like it be a motor neurone or in football world, you're injured, you go to surgeon, they pull out the scalpel and they saw and they screw and they fix you up and you move on. But it was a shock that, what do you mean you can't fix me? So that was a reality check. And
there seems to be quite a bit more to you than just the footballer, though. You did a BA in business at RMIT, majoring in human resources and industrial relations. Did you see yourself as a man who could reconcile and solve disputes?
Oh, no. I probably create a few disputes. A bit of a red ragger, industrial relations. And it was something, I started a year, I did my HSC at the time and I wasn't that keen on working, so I got into a course at Phillip, which became RMIT, and it was certainly not much application and dropped out after a year. And football wasn't going that well. I thought I got to make something of my life, and I was in a relationship at the time. You think you got to get moving, and I went back and tried to get something behind me, a ticket, and from there I applied myself reasonably well. And football was always a strong bent, but it was fantastic at 28 to finish, and gave me an opportunity to, you know, a screening process to work in recruitment. So it wasn't a passion, but it was something I could show I could commit and a capacity to learn, and it's certainly a screening process in the labour market, isn't it?
One of the blokes down at the club says that you're a bit of an accidental coach and that you very nearly left the game behind for good. Yeah,
but that's true. I termed that the accidental coach, and when I left Brisbane, I was really keen to get on my life, and Robert Walls was the coach, and he offered me a role at Richmond part-time, and I said, look, I'm not that interested. He said, I'll call you when we're in Melbourne, and he was at Richmond. I didn't want to be a slave to the game, and you're very insecure, even playing, and it's almost that culture.
Did you know that then? Were you very aware of that then, that all around you, it's full of people who are slaves to the game?
Certainly, yeah. Really, as much as Matt was a tradie, and I saw him bring home the bacon regularly and provide, and we had a wonderful, every year we went around the caravan up the coast, and Easter we went inland to the Grampians, and it certainly wasn't a luxurious environment, but we never went without. You know, we always played sport, and I'd been in relationships that, or a long-term that had really affected, and it was affecting Kirsten, who I'm with now, the ability to commit, because I thought, how am I going to provide for a family? So that was always on the radar, and even though I had the ticket, I hadn't really implemented much. So yeah, I was vulnerable, but fortunately I took the opportunity to work part-time. I could do both, and I was really keen to build a career outside of football and get a real job.
And yet, for all that, you know, you start with Walls at Richmond, and then it's Carlton and Sydney with your friend Paul Roos, and then to St Kilda. And we'll touch on this just briefly. You know, your record with St Kilda's a fantastic one. 121 games, 5 seasons, 3 trips to the grand final, 2 in 1 year. But I do want you to talk a bit about 2009 and what was happening off the field, because that was a hell of a year.
Yeah, I don't want to correct you, but I should. 2009 was pretty smooth.
Is it 2010 that I'm referring to?
Yeah, it was the end of 2009. It really started rolling into 2009. There was my first 3 years at the Saints. There's certainly not one off-field. 2007, 8 and 9. And really, post the grand final loss, which challenges all clubs. It started with Luke Ball parting ways with the club and myself, and then the Andrew Lovett recruitment, and then they're going sideways quickly. But
there, you know, I'm not talking about you as the football coach.
I was part of the environment.
No, but I'm talking about you and your personal circumstances.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm not actually talking
I've left
footy.
it behind.
You have. I'm not actually talking footy.
Okay, yeah. Personally, finance-wise, yeah, I think it's reasonably well documented. It was private for a long period, but everyone suffers significant loss. And it was an investment that had been in for 10 years at went sideways in a brief period of time that left us vulnerable. That was at the end of '08. Yeah, so just purchased a family home, had other investments, and obviously in a position when the GFC hit that I'd left myself vulnerable in my family, and we had to make some adjustments and
Sold your properties?
yeah,
And you moved back in with Dad?
yeah, just because we were renting and we had the property and we had the settlement coming and had some margin loans and all those things. So
I know that you play this kind of small, but I do want to talk about these things rather than footy because of the year of which you endured. So the amount of money doesn't matter, but you lose a significant amount of money. You move back into your dad's place.
Which was geographically challenging because it was about 55k from
long way from
Moorabbin.
Moorabbin, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you don't really let people know that this is happening because you're coaching a football team.
Yeah.
You got more important things to worry about. But beyond money lost or property sold, you were dealing with bereavement.
Well, there was a loss, and certainly ego and pride and looking at my wife and who had always trusted where we'd gone. And it's certainly, and at that point I had enormous choice. I could have walked away, didn't have to coach, So I certainly had to provide for the family and in an insecure industry, which it still is. And AFL coaching, it's very brutal and it's a results-orientated business and really just been smashed in a prelim, top four in a prelim, but had been annihilated by Hawthorn and still a long way off the top two. So there's significant work to be done on fixing the mechanics at St Kilda Football Club to improve, and this all happened. So, back in, it was all December, January, and so I was dealing with those things and then preparing the team, and then obviously football-wise was bar 30 minutes the most successful season in the club's history, really, 20 in a row.
But when I talk about bereavement, you return to football, but I'm talking about the family bereavement and I'm talking about the loss of your sister.
In 2010, yeah. That's not raw, but it always brings up some emotion. So that was about round 16. We were playing Collingwood that week. And I'd been a little bit ill, and because she was fighting breast cancer, and they're vulnerable with the chemo in the hospital. But all my sisters have been going because I had the cold. I didn't want to go in and, expose her to that, which you weren't supposed to. But I rang and didn't get her and left a message and told her I was sick. And I'd been sick for a couple of weeks. So I'd been keeping abreast of it. And I rang my other sisters and they said, look, she's not great, but she's okay. And then I went to bed that night, and then Kirsten knocked on the door about 11:30 and informed me that my sister had passed away. So come as a bit of a shock.
And you didn't get to say goodbye?
No.
And I don't raise that with you to be meddlesome or troublesome, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I ask only because I've got a fair idea what that feels like.
Yeah.
And one of my best friends, the journalist Matt Price, died a few years ago, and the fact I didn't get to farewell him sits with me in my guts today, and I can't reconcile it.
Yeah, it's very difficult because prior to that, my mum, I was living in Sydney and got a call. They think mum's going to pass away, so I flew back, but she was okay, and we said our goodbyes and had a cuddle and all those things. And I said, look, I can't keep coming back every time. She said, look, I'm fine. So when she passed away the day of a final, I think we were playing West Coast from memory in Sydney. It was easy to deal with it, and I went to the final and coached as an assistant because I'd said goodbye. So, yeah, when it's a shock, and as much as we knew she was very ill, it was that not saying goodbye was really quite difficult. But it all depends what you want to make of the previous 47 years and focus on that. I don't think she knew how I felt about her, and so that's really all that counts. But it would have been nice. I was a bit jealous that everyone else had seen her that night.